Hello, Rebels. Welcome to the base. Steve Hilton here. Kristen Garcia-Dumont is with me today. Kristen, how are you doing?
Great.
All right. It sounds like you're ready to go. We've got a very interesting guest lined up who's going to be joining us in a minute. He's got a documentary highly relevant to the recall election that is now just days away. We've got so much great conversation on this podcast about the recall. Have you subscribed yet? Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you subscribe. It's really important, and we really appreciate it. Our numbers are growing fast, and we want to make sure they keep going in the right direction. All right, now let's welcome our guest for today, Jeff Roldan. He is behind a documentary with a title, I'm going to say it's kind of self-explanatory, but there's a lot more to it than that. The title of the documentary is State of Corruption, Recall Newsom. I wonder what that's about. Let's hear the trailer, and Jeff will be here on the other side to talk to us about it.
I love California. It was just an amazing place.
All of the natural wonders, the beauty, amazing people and companies and culture.
But we've watched it be decimated.
Everything that is great about California has just been overwhelmed by the failure of our politics.
We have the worst schools. We have homeless out of control. We pay the highest taxes, and they are trying to erase small business.
Now is the state that everyone wants to get out of.
I will have the incredible privilege of serving as your next governor.
Gavin Newsom's policies were driving the state towards disaster.
Other efforts that are going on, including an effort to recall you.
I honestly haven't had a chance to even pay much attention to it.
This governor wants to ignore the recall, hope it goes away, but it's not.
He has fashioned himself in the mold of an ancient Roman dictator.
If there was an executive who is this abusive and dictatorial, he would be fired. We're just firing a politician.
Our job is to make sure that this governor is held accountable and that he is recalled from office.
This is something we just got to do for the state. We're going to stay and fight.
There are a dozen cities out there right now that are rising up against Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom!
Somewhere along the line, the people in California became the underdog.
We are the people. All I see are different races joining together.
The business of politics is going to change.
We can make change.
That's the power of what we're doing.
Will you be lifting your pandemic emergency on June 15th?
The emergency remains in effect after June 15th.
Long live the king.
Pisses me off just to see that guy's face.
So Jeff, so which side are you on then on this recall?
I think we should give him another chance, right?
Yeah.
That was terrific. Very, very well put together. I love the trailer. Let's hear a little bit about the story behind this. How you got to, where did it start? How you got to the idea of putting this out there, and just tell us the journey you've been on to get to this point.
I think the journey that a lot of Californians can relate to started about a year and a half ago when the lockdowns occurred and our governor decided to take a direction that really affected a lot of people's lives in our state, and the impact we'll feel for a long, long time. So back then I was kind of in a state of disbelief because, like a lot of Californians, just enjoying life, kind of not really politically active, show up for the voting election day, vote for your candidate, we'll see what happens, right? But this really hit home for a lot of people. And for me, I couldn't believe what was going on. It seemed like a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And it didn't seem to make sense to me. So after kind of pondering it and thinking about what I could do, and I know I wasn't alone, but a lot of people at that point, about April and May, weren't speaking out because it just wasn't a popular thing to do. I don't know if you recall that feeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the backlash that would come on social media if you even mentioned going to like a freedom rally or anything like that, like, you're going to kill people. So I thought about it and I thought, you know what? I consider myself a one-trick pony, but it's a really cool trick. I make documentaries. So I said, I got to do a documentary about this lockdown. And so I went ahead and I started working with a producer, and we, throughout the process of the next several months, went out and traveled the country and started interviewing people and getting stories, and put together a film called Liberty Lockdown. Mm-hmm. And we released that last November. And I can say that a lot of people were impacted by the release of that film, and it just gave a lot of people courage. I know certain people who have watched it have been inspired to take more action in their own lives, even run for political office. So really felt good about putting that out there. So that was my first taste of any type of political filmmaking, and I'm hooked. I got to be honest, because I tapped into something that I'm very passionate about. Ask anybody who knows me. 4th of July is my favorite holiday. Always has been. I can't get through the 4th of July watching the fireworks and then hearing the music without getting emotional. I love that we are free, and I've always appreciated that. So I think what inspired me to continue on and making any type of political film is definitely motivated by my love for freedom, and in particular my love for the state. I've always lived here and have grown up here and love traveling up and down and seeing the various parts. But, when those lockdowns started and then continuing on and hearing about the recall, I decided to, take on this project as sort of a follow-up to Liberty Lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
And it really tapped into this citizens movement. I mean, I'm sure you saw that, and it was really powerful to hear from these people who are, there's even that one guy, Tim Holliday, who is in a wheelchair. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name right, but he's literally going door to door in his wheelchair trying to collect signatures because, he feels so passionate about this movement. And you're really trying to, I think, bring out in the film this sense of, this is really people coming together and saying enough. We're the ones being hurt by these irresponsible policies, and these are real people with real problems, with real pain, and those voices deserve to be heard.
Yeah, that's right. There's so many. It was actually one of the more difficult things about this project is that there's so many stories, right? How do you whittle it down? And Tim is just a great example, a person who is in a wheelchair and yet went out, and the story is he looked for a place to sign the recall and ended up wheeling himself 11 miles just to sign. That's how passionate he was about getting his signature on the recall.
That's right.
It's an amazing story. I loved everything you said there in explaining kind of how you came to do this project. I completely agree. It's exactly how I feel. I mean, I haven't lived here all my life, but nearly the last 9 years or so, just over. And I feel the same way about the state. And that's why I love the way the story in the trailer is certainly unfolds, where we all agree we love California. This is a movement born of love for the state, and a desire to see it become what it. I wasn't here then, but a lot of people say it certainly used to be in terms of capturing that notion of the California dream and the opportunity for everyone to build an amazing life here, and actually to make it better. That's what we all want to see. When you say you hadn't done political films, just tell us a bit about that. I mean, what kind of documentaries had you been making, and then how has it been different now doing political work in terms of, I don't know, your ability to get your work out there and how it's been received?
Absolutely. Originally, I mean, the skill of it, I think, revolves around storytelling, and that's what I've always been good at. There's guys in filmmaking that are much better at cinematography or sound or light or whatever, but my wheelhouse has always been storytelling. The industries that I would use that in typically revolved around inspirational personal development documentaries. I've done those medical documentaries, things that have always revolved around trying to create some type of change or get a message to an audience. And a lot of people have desires to start a movement, and a documentary film can be very powerful in that regard because you've got a captive audience. They're able to sit there. It's a different form than just popping on a video and then turning it off, 3 minutes later. there's time to process and time to have the message sink deep. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about the feature-length documentaries is the audience is able to become more intimate with the message. And so, yeah, I did a lot of, like I said, personal development and things that really did help people. And I would always get those types of remarks. But something I've discovered in this is that it is so, the impact of this can be so universal because everybody is affected by our government and our leadership, whether they like it or not, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to quote Newsom there, but they on a daily basis, we can ignore it or we can embrace that we have to be part of this society, which is led by a government that's going to create our laws and tell us what to do. And we are the people that are supposed to be in charge of that. And somewhere in the mix in the last several decades, we lost that.
Who's financing this?
This was financed, I think it's very symbolic, it's financed by the people. We've had a GoFundMe up for this last several months and have been able to raise a small amount of money, but enough to keep us going and get this out there. And the reality was, funding or not, I was going to get this out there because I care so much about the message and, putting it out here. I think the initial interest in the story was to have some type of impact on the election. And that certainly is the intention, even with such a short time before the election. But as I was creating this, and it turned from building a case against Gavin Newsom, it turned more into just telling the story of the recall and the people that are behind it.
Yeah.
And I found that definitely more uplifting than trying to do a smear campaign of Newsom. Yes, we do discuss that in the film, but I think more inspirational stories like Orrin Heatley and Mike Netter, the leaders of the recall, and where their hearts are, I think that's more important for the public to know.
And like you say, the guy being so committed to change, to kind of wheel themselves 11 miles, amazing. I mean, what is it part of the recall campaign? Are you part of that effort officially, or you're just supportive of it, but it's an independent thing?
No, I'm not part of the recall campaign. I'm a volunteer, if you will, and that's what this whole movement has been about. And as you'll see in the film, the volunteers are what made this thing happen. It's the people. And I think that that's very important to remember in this whole thing, that it wasn't a bulk of paid petitioners, gatherers like traditionally. This was done way different than any other campaign has been done in the past.
Nor was there huge money or huge celebrity or any help. I mean, it really was shoe leather. People just going every weekend to, highway overpasses, grocery stores, malls, collecting signatures, the old fashioned way. It's just really remarkable how passionate people were about this recall. And I think sometimes people forget that, as Kevin Kiley says, and I heard, it's nice to hear his voice in the documentary, this is one of the greatest citizen movements of all time. And I think that's why the nation's paying attention to it, because it makes people feel inspired that, you really can effectuate change and stand up to these corrupt politicians. It's really inspiring, and you're telling that story. But I got to imagine it's really tough to be a conservative, filmmaker in sort of this state and, sort of the state of the nation right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an era where we've been blessed with technology and been able to, it's more abundantly available outside of the typical Hollywood industry. So I've been able to keep my distance from Hollywood. And I think that's important too, because you don't want to have the political influence there, especially in films like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So how have you got it out there? How's it being distributed? And
well, right now,
how can people watch it now? Just tell, if anyone's listening wants to check it out, what should they do?
It's it's going to be available later today. We're going to make it available through Vimeo, which is pretty much thus far the only platform that doesn't reject any type of production like this, which is kind of scary. But So we'll have it on Vimeo. People can go to info@recallgavinmovie.com, or sorry, that's the email. They can go to recallgavinmovie.com and or the recallgavin2020.com, the campaign as well. They're going to have a link there. So just to reiterate, that's recallgavinmovie.com, and the link will be made available just shortly.
Have you tried to put it on other platforms?
Yeah, the same question. Yeah.
We're just getting it out there, so we haven't had that attempt. But with Liberty Lockdown, the experience I had was there wasn't a lot of interest in something like that through the Netflixes or the Amazons.
Interesting.
And I wanted to ask you about the. Not really. I had a real. It's when you think about the point you made about how this started, right? You had the GoFundMe. And then you tell the story, and as you say, evolved from being the kind of critique of Newsom into the story of the people's movement. I just think that there's such an interesting point there about what's going on, and it relates to what I often talk about. Both I've written about and talk about often on my Fox show, which is this idea of positive populism, right? And how populism actually, in its real meaning, is about people power, putting power in people's hands. And it's so interesting how we're seeing that now on this side of the political argument, because it used to be the case that the Conservatives, Republicans, it was always they're the big business and big corporations and the Koch brothers and whatever, and it was Bernie Sanders, for example, on the left talk about people powered politics and small donors and that kind of thing. Actually, right now, all that energy, certainly in this effort, is on the conservative side, and it's not just conservatives, it's independents, it's some Democrats too. Point that Kevin Kiley makes all the time. Kevin has been on this podcast a number of times. He points out that I think he has a story of Bernie Sanders voters and donors who actually they've been contributed to his campaign and to this effort. It's so exciting, that kind of sense of a citizens movement for real people power, taking the power away from the corrupt, complacent governance that's been going on in California for so long. And I just wanted to ask you about that aspect of it finally, the corrupt point, the state of corruption, that word corruption that's in the title. Why did you put that there? What does that mean to you, and how would you see that evolving, beyond the recall as an important aspect of this argument?
Yeah. Well, the corruption implies really anything that is going against what our founders of this country established, meaning the powers of the people and having that separation of power. We've seen Gavin Newsom consolidate in the past year all of his powers. We've seen, if you were to have a script for a feature film and have the villain do, you're brainstorming on the different types of ways that you could have this villain show his corruption, the different deals and stuff like that. I think he's gone down that list and made almost every point that you possibly could with that. He has, the corruption has to do with the foundation of our country and what it was built upon and the power of the people. And that's missing. That's missing right now. And I'm sure most of the audience can agree with that is we're no longer in a state of freedom. We're no longer in a state of power of the people, but that particular power has been taken away from us. And so,
labeled as dangerous. Did you guys see that the National Archives now has a trigger warning on the Constitution?
What?
No, not joking. If you go to the website, there's a trigger warning when you try to look at our founding documents, because you bring up the founding documents a lot, and I always reference them, and I want people to go look at them. But if people go and look at them on the website, there literally is a trigger warning saying it contains offensive content.
That's amazing. Is that really true?
It's true. Go look.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. I did not know that.
But I think, Jeff, you're making the point of we need to return to our roots. What was remarkable to me was how much power Gavin Newsom amassed, using the excuse of COVID and this state of emergency. He became an absolute dictator. And I think people, it was very, very rare to hear Kevin Kiley type people saying, this is against the Constitution. This is so contrary to what it means to be an American. We don't live under tyrannical rule like that. He doesn't have a right to have this kind of power and influence over our lives and shut down our businesses and shut down our schools and amass all this power. But people unfortunately forgot it. So.
And it's
really tragic.
If I can just jump in there, and then I'll give you the last word in a minute, Jeff. I just think that there's something personal for me in that I've really, like you talk about, July the 4th and how much it means to you. I feel exactly the same way. I get emotional too. I've just recently become a citizen, and the response to all this that we've seen here in America and then back in the UK, where obviously I spent most of my life. It's just so interesting. It makes me so happy to be here, which is you've seen this kind of tyrannical stuff pushed out by actually a conservative government in the UK, Boris Johnson's government. And every now and again, I sort of check in with what's going on there. Just utterly ludicrous, tyrannical overreach. Like, I remember there was one sort of laughable thing about when they were lifting one element of the restrictions that they'd put in place. This was reported in all seriousness in the Times of London, the newspaper, like from Monday, the whatever date, from Monday, people will be able to sit on park benches with another person and touch someone from another and hug someone from another household. And you think, what? for like nearly a year, they'd been stopped from doing those things. But there's no real sign of the kind of protest that you see here, and there's no aspect where, for example, in America, at least, you've had some states where you've had a different strategy adopted, and you can see the impact. And I don't want to get back into the whole pandemic stuff, but I just think that it's so. I don't know what the word is. It's just so. Just makes me feel so good about being an American that there has been this resistance and it is building and we are seeing the recall. It's just a wonderful thing. Okay, Jeff, last word to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You reminded me that this awakening and this activation, we had a screening of the film the other night, and I actually thanked Gavin Newsom because he, in a direct way, activated a lot of people. And I don't think we're going to be able to go back to the way things were. And I think that's the most important thing about this, and the message of the film too, is that politics aside, if you love freedom and you love this country and you love the principles that it was founded on, then you should be voting yes on this recall, because what's going on right now is not okay. It's not in alignment with the principles of this country, and it's going in the wrong direction. And I don't care what political base or party you affiliate with. It doesn't matter. If you love freedom and the value that there is in having people come to the table and collaborate and compromise and come with different ideas and be able to implement laws and go through the legislative process like that, I mean, that's what really needs to be happening. And somehow we've forgotten that, and somehow a lot of the people in the state are okay with that, which is perplexing. But I just want people, when they view this, to really analyze the hearts of those who are involved. This is not only a movement of the people, it's a movement of people with great hearts and who love this country and who love this state, and who genuinely, despite whatever Gavin Newsom may be spewing out there about the founders or the proponents of this recall, their intention is to set things right in this state and bring back a balance of powers, which we've lost.
Well said, Jeff. Really, really appreciate everything you said today. Thank you for joining us in the base, but most of all, thank you for making this film fantastic. And we'll make sure we put out all the information about where people can listen to. Just remind us one last time where people can go to watch it.
Yeah, it's recallgavinmovie.com. recallgavinmovie.com. Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you, Jeff. All right, all the best.
I'd forgotten until we saw the preview, that interview with Gavin where he's so dismissive of the recall effort. He he's not even paying attention to it. He really hasn't. He's so busy. And it's just this classic narcissistic personality that I think has really played through during this recall effort of now he's in victim mode, right? How is it that everyone doesn't love me and worship me? He's been at least consistent for the last 6 months that this is offensive. It's beneath him. He shouldn't have to spend any time. When he's sort of caught unawares about a question by the press, he really just drips condescension. He's so annoyed and irritated that he has to talk about anything he doesn't want to talk about. Of course, the pandemic and the emergency are still continuing, right? The emergency is not over. How dare you peons challenge me and my authority? Yeah. It's remarkable how he's behaved. He still doesn't get it even now. And we're how many days away?
I know. I mean, I think it just so much of it comes back to this central fact, I think, which is this, the way they've had it all their own way politically for so long with the one party rule in California. And that's what breeds this complacency. Like, of course, we're not going to be challenged, but also the arrogance and the hubris and the lack of accountability. Like they just haven't had proper scrutiny from the media. They haven't had proper challenge because the Republican Party's been so weak. And so they're not used to it. In a normal competitive political environment, of course you take on board criticisms and comments and and people complain. You've got your answers ready. You know what to say. You make your case. There's none of that here because they're just not used to any kind of challenge. It's really revealing, and that's why I think the whatever happens with the actual vote, this is just going to get worse and worse for them because people are seeing that now. They're seeing the consequences of this one-party rule. The other thing I thought was interesting about there were lots of interesting things about his. What he's saying, but the point about how technology has changed the dynamics of filmmaking in this way. Like, you could never get a film like that commissioned and made in the old system, but technology has meant, but both in terms of making the film, but also GoFundMe and raising the money. It's all, it is a good, I mean, we beat up on technology and big tech often and with good reason, but it really has enabled this kind of people power and grassroots activism in a way that you just wouldn't have been possible before.
That's exactly right. I mean, you've got Vimeo and Rumble and people who are saying, look, we're going to stand for freedom and freedom of speech, even though you see this censorship on YouTube and other channels. So, the internet still has been, overall great for humanity and great for small journalists and great for actually getting the truth out. And you're absolutely right. He'd never be able to make this film, if it wasn't for social media and for a free internet. So we have a lot to be grateful for there.
It's interesting. All right, so let's get to the campaign because there's been a lot going on. Most notably, a very, very important visitor to our state.
I can't.
Just the other day. So let's hear what she had to say.
Gavin rose to the moment. In this state, with the largest population of any state in the country, I've been traveling around the world, larger than many countries. And Gavin stepped up to the moment. He didn't say my state is too big for me.
I can't.
What is that? Like, what WTF, as we would say. What does that mean? Like, literally, what does it? He didn't say my state. So how is that an argument for anything?
It's not. But it's like they have nothing to say. There's no record to run on. So you have to say these idiotic things like, he didn't complain that the state is so big. What?
What are you talking about?
Like, what are you talking about?
I mean, I know, okay, fine, people can say that's not fair. She spoke for whatever. I don't know how long she spoke for, 20 minutes or maybe, I don't know, right? And she talked about other, specific policies. But the fact that she can say something so totally inane and meaningless, it's just like, what? I don't know. It was just absolutely stunning when I heard that.
It's not like she said anything else of substance. I mean, we listened to the whole thing. She doesn't.
I didn't hear the whole thing.
It's conclusion after conclusion. He stands for women. He stands for farmers. How? Because you kept my kids at home and I couldn't go to work because of your pandemic policies and your closures, right? How'd you stand for farmers? I mean, it's these platitudes and assuming that these groups are going to vote in a block. They don't see them as people with real problems. They just see them as blocks of votes. So she had nothing to say, and then it falls back on this. But the state is so huge. Really? Are you going to praise Governor Abbott now for all he's done? I mean, his state's 30 million people. So that's what we do now, is the big states get extra credit? It's so dumb. It's so dumb.
It's so dumb. It's so unbelievably dumb. And I can't believe that he actually thinks it even helps her. The hilarious thing I have to say about the way he sort of, she's wheeled out to try and save his job in the final stages is like, Look, I know a lot of, I've been here a few years. I know a lot of Democrats in California, including Democrats who know Kamala Harris very well and have worked with her very closely and know her personally. And I can tell you for an absolute fact that he fucking despises Kamala Harris. I'm just telling you, that is a fact.
As do the rest of us.
I wouldn't say that, but as do most Democrats. I'm just talking about Democrats, not who know her. And this is one of the points that was made all through the process when she was being vetted for the vice presidency. It was all communicated to Biden, basically the people who know her best in California cannot stand her. And they make the same point, which is that she is only focused on one thing, which is not political principles or policy agenda that she wants to implement. Like, what is best for her? That is what you hear the whole time. So it's kind of hilarious that he's all kind of chumming along with her, whatever the word would be, wheeling her out to try and save his job when they're
frenemies.
More than that. I wouldn't even. I would delete the fre part of that.
Well, she was hated when she was in San Francisco. She's always been hated. She was our district attorney in San Francisco, and nobody could stand her then. And everybody knew that she was a political shill. She was totally empty. She stood for nothing. She said whatever she needed to say to get elected. And I think America knew that right away. That's why she's always polled so terribly. So I don't get the strategy of, could you bring out the most unlikable people? Warren, Klobuchar, now Kamala, and then top it all off with the cherry of Biden's going to come out. He's trying to lose.
I think it's such great news. He's bringing Biden out. He's being wheeled out on Monday, I think, the day before the recall. What does he think that's going to help? It's just, literally you've someone who's just had got to be the worst month of any president in memory. And has been revealed to be just like Kamala. That's what I've always said about both of them, actually, that they're both the same. Biden and Kamala Harris, both the same. They are totally corrupt machine politicians who believe in absolutely nothing. They only care about one thing, which is their own political advancement. That's why they're all over the place on policy. You can see it with both of them. Kamala Harris in the past was, tough on crime, and now she's Black Lives Matter and sort of criminal justice reform. Biden been on every side of every big question, wrong on every foreign policy question for the last 40 years, as Robert Gates said. They don't believe in anything. And that's why when there's a crisis, as Biden has faced, they have no bedrock to fall back on, no bedrock of belief. There's literally nothing there other than getting through and getting on and climbing the ladder of politics. And so they kind of deserve each other. But the idea that they're going to kind of help Gavin, I just think is ludicrous. What about the other thing we saw? Was it the same day? The Larry Elder, the treatment of Larry Elder. I
was just going to say, why isn't Kamala talking about that? So Black Lives Matter, unless it's Larry Elder. Here she was in California. It was a perfect opportunity for her to denounce a clearly racist act. If that's not a hate crime, I'm not even sure what a hate crime is. And for those who don't know, you got to go watch this video. There's a white woman in a gorilla mask showing up to heckle and harass and assault somebody who's running for governor and would be the first Black governor of California. And she hurls an egg at him and then slaps some guy who's in Larry Elder's security team. And then what was just so classic was then when somebody, gently put their hand on her, she flipped out. Don't touch me, right? After she's, truly tried to hurt and harm a candidate. It was so incredibly racist. There are actual acts of racism by Democrats, and they never get called out. It never gets discussed. And it's how you know that it's completely fake. All this BLM and we stand for minorities. Bullshit. No, you don't. You just want power and votes. You don't care about Black Lives Matter at all, period, full stop.
And there's so many aspects of this. I mean, exactly as you say, they don't get called out. I mean, if you saw the media reports, LA Times and whatever, all the news reports, I mean, the headlines and the story, it was just laughable. It was things like, Ariel faces angry protests at whatever. Like, you can imagine if it was the other way around, right? If it was a white Republican who had thrown an egg at a black Democrat candidate, it would just be like the main story with the race angle, absolutely at the top of the story in every news outlet.
The Department of Justice would be opening a hate crime investigation. I guarantee it. But you can be hateful to minority conservatives. It's totally stunning, and I really hope it opens people's eyes. It's really to outrageous. The hypocrisy.
Yeah, I mean, we can sort of joke about it, as it were, but it's also deeply, deeply, depressing, actually, that it's their commitment to these causes is so shallow. I mean, for example, if you had, again, like the positions were reversed, and you had, it was their top candidate who was a black candidate, they would all be, every single thing that every time they talked about him, it would be, do you remember this word we saw at the beginning of the Biden regime when they were making all these appointments? Every appointment was historic. The first woman this, the first whatever. And it would be historic. The first black governor, historic. But it's not historic when it's a black Republican. Suddenly, he's a white supremacist.
It's exactly right. I mean, look at the words that they use. What if a white candidate for president, when referring to Obama, remarked that he was clean? A black man is clean. This is stunning. Oh, and he's articulate. I mean, there's actual racism, this like fundamental in their bones racism that comes out every once in a while, never gets discussed as truly the problem. Instead, we make up these, boogeymen over on the right, that the right is so racist. Just call out racism regardless of party. Hold people to account for actual racism, regardless of political affiliation.
I mean, I actually talked about this on my Fox show on Sunday, because actually last week when he was Biden was down, was it FEMA or Louisiana, whatever, looking at the storm damage from Hurricane Ida. And Cedric Richardson, his black aide, senior advisor, whatever he's called, he called him boy. This was just last week. And in the past, when I've talked about this, I've tried to sort of, skirt around it, and I've said publicly, well, because of course you've got that example there of the that you cited with the way he talked about Obama. You've also got the way that Biden talked about. Do you remember that phrase where white kids are just as smart as poor kids, or whatever? Poor kids are just as smart as white kids.
Yep.
And then back a few years back when he was talking about you can't run a 7-Eleven in Delaware without a slight Indian accent. It was one after another, right? And I'd skirted around and said, look, he's got a racist mindset. I just think he is a racist. There's no question. He's a good old-fashioned racist. The fact that you can say these things reveals what's inside of you. I would never speak like that, never have. And the fact that he did shows, I think, that he really is a racist, and yet no one says anything about it in the media, on the Democrat side. It's completely outrageous.
Okay, the other thing I want to talk about, which is kind of off point, but we never got to talk about it, which was that LAUSD leader who said, remember this whole story where she said she doesn't care that our kids don't know their times tables? That's okay?
Because they know how to, what was it? They
know the words riot and insurrection.
Insurrection.
I thought of it again yesterday because, the legislature just passed that bill, which officially makes CRT, critical race theory, official in schools now. In order for students to graduate, they need to take this ethnic studies, curriculum, which people have decried as anti-Semitic and so on. And so, just this faux attention to combating racism, when you have these actual acts of racism, statements that are truly racist, and nobody calling those out, it ties into exactly why Gavin's being recalled. People are tired of the fake.
Yeah.
They don't want you saying we have to follow all the rules and then you go have dinner at the French Laundry. I totally understand your kids are suffering, and then you send your kids to private school. People are sick of it, and that's what the movement is about. The movement is about saying enough. Just don't be a liar. Be honest and be honorable. and then we'll elect you. And if you're not, we're going to throw you out. Because enough with this professional politician class where the rest of us get treated like peasants. People are sick of it.
They are. It's a good note to leave it on, I think, Kristen, because I think that captures very much how we're all feeling. And that documentary that we heard about, Jeff Roldan's documentary, captures that very powerfully. It's good to have him on today. All right, let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Kristen. That was fun.
That was fun.
All right, and we'll see you again on the next California Rebel Base. Make sure you subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review. Help us get the word out. Not long to go until the recall. We need all the support we can get in this big movement that's building in California. See you next time.